We are the Liberty Intelligence Organization Network, and it is Saturday, April 5th, 2014. I am your host, Ricky Phillips. Now, before I get started, some of you who may be tuning in and may have tuned into my earlier videos that I put up may notice a style format change, mainly because I was unsatisfied with the sound quality of my cell phone shot videos. Basically, I found them to be unwatchable to some extent, where you'd have to turn the volume up way loud and it was still really hard to hear what I was talking about. So I decided to switch to a better format using a different mic. So it's going to have really good audio quality, but unfortunately there will be no video. So I will be putting up still images, usually just a basic thumbnail picture showing that, you know, you're listening to the Liberty Intelligence Organization Network, a little bit about us, and then the date, so you'll know the date of the news. Now, for those of you who don't know, this may be your first time listening in or looking at anything that we've put out from L.I.O.N News here. And for those of you who aren't aware, we are a media network devoted to informing and empowering individuals about their liberty, about individual liberty, and also trying to teach people about the various threats that exist all around the world to your individual liberty, and how by being aware of these things and by speaking out against these things, we can hopefully avoid falling back into a tyrannical system. I'm a historian. I was trained as a historian when I went to school. I got a BA in history. For those of you who want to know a little bit about who I am, and I know that from studying history, the liberty we've experienced in the United States for the past 200 plus years is a very rare gem in the historical record. Usually, the world is dominated by strong men, by tyrants, by kings, by pharaohs. And it's their will that dictates all of humanity in their area of control. And you can go back through any history. Freedom and liberty is something that is very scarce. One striking aspect of the Celtic traditions and the Viking traditions is that they were sort of built around a semi-republic format where people would have to not really vote for their leader, but the leader would have to show qualities that would allow them to maintain leadership. They wouldn't be able to rule by force because they would have to maintain that the warrior class agreed with them, and in the Viking and Celtic cultures, everybody was a member of the warrior class. So, you know, that's just one of the other gems in history where liberty was actually a founding ideal for a form of government that existed in the past. Now, and if you want to find it again, you have to flash forward all the way to 1776 and the founding of the United States of America, which was really the blossom of the flower that bloomed out of the Renaissance and the Reformation. For those of you who don't know what the Renaissance and the Reformation were, those were time periods that began around the 1490s and continued all the way up through 1776 and, you know, a little bit onward. Finally, you know, culminating with the founding of the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which enumerated basic individual liberties which already existed. It was just written down for the first time, and an entire form of government was formed around those principles. If you're living in the modern era now, you'll realize that those ideals of liberty that were used to found the United States of America are no longer in play. Most of them have already been wiped clean, whether it's your Fourth Amendment rights through the NSA or whether it's your First Amendment rights through free speech zones. They've all been limited and whittled away slowly and surely. Whether it's, you know, ammunition bans or bans on pistol grips that infringes upon your right to keep and bear arms. These are just basic individual liberties that every living creature upon the face of the planet Earth has, and they don't get it from a government, they get it from the fact that they are alive. So that's basically what the Liberty Intelligence Organization Network is about. We're about teaching people about liberty, about empowering you, because with the knowledge you attain through shows like this, listening to people inform you about liberty, or studying and researching the ideals of liberty yourself. And I mean, it's fun and exciting to learn about the world you live in. For all the people who are obsessed with science fiction fantasy worlds or video game fantasy worlds, you're living in the greatest fantasy world ever created. And it's called life. It's called the planet Earth. So I just want people to understand that. Now, I recently talked to someone who was informed about all this stuff and understood it all, but they were doubtful that we would ever stop this criminal organization, which calls itself the New World Order. They felt like we should all of us who are aware of this, should just shelter ourselves and, hide ourselves and just try to survive, I guess. But I told him, you can't do that, because let's say all of us who know what's going on decide we're going to go hide out, and we're not going to talk about this stuff. We're not going to try to wake other people up. We're just going to worry about us and our own, and we're going to go build our own little, hidden communities out in the middle of nowhere. Well, let's say we go do that, and the rest of the world falls to the New World Order. Well, what's to stop the New World Order from just dropping a chemical weapon on our little hidden communities at that point? Once they get all the people they want into the mega cities and are rounding people up for FEMA camps, if we already place ourselves in hidden and isolated communities, they don't even have to build a FEMA camp. They just got to put a fence up around us. So that was my argument to this guy, that if you know about this stuff, you have to talk about this stuff, even if you face criticism and ridicule or worse. Some people lose their job. There's a chance I could lose the job I have because I do talk about this stuff, not only to my coworkers, but also to the customers that come through our store. I just always feel it's important to inform people about the world they live in, and help empower them to make better decisions and better choices in their life. So that's basically what this radio show that I've, hopefully am going to start doing on a daily basis. Again, it is the L.I.O.N. News Daily Report. And L.I.O.N, of course, is an acronym for the Liberty Intelligence Organization Network. So I guess that about does it for the intro. I hope people stay tuned and listen in, because the more I go through this, I'm going to start getting into news on a daily basis and hopefully trying to analyze and connect everything. Because a lot of times if you just read the news but you don't thoroughly analyze and connect different articles together, realize that one article about the economy may connect to something that's going on in international affairs. If you're unable to analyze and understand that, you can always turn to other analysts or other pundits or other opinionated news readers who may have found a connection that you perhaps didn't see. So it's always important to try and get as many sources as you can for news and information. And I'm just putting my voice out there and my knowledge out there as another one of those sources. Now, this isn't a real radio show. It's a pre-recorded YouTube channel show, so I don't have any advertisers. I don't have any sponsors. There's not going to be any commercial breaks. I'm just going to try to go over as much as I can. The show will probably, range about, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes to maybe an hour and a half, depending on how much news I'm going to cover and how much, how many divergent topics I break off into. Because as I read through these news articles, it always reminds me of other things, and I might start connecting it to other things, and that's actually one of the benefits, so that as you see me make connections, maybe you can learn to make connections as well. Now, like I always like to say to anybody who already knows about all this stuff, and you might be tuning in like, oh, this is a waste of time, oh, you shouldn't be talking about this. Well, if you already know about all this stuff and you're already a news hound and you already pay attention to what's going on in the world around you, you should not be spending your time sitting back and listening to other liberty-minded talk show people, other people out there who are trying to expose the truth. Because if you already know about this stuff, you should be doing something. You should be out, going to speak to your local legislators, calling your congresspeople, or starting your own YouTube radio show, or better than that, calling up Access TV and making a documentary about something, going and interviewing your state representatives, but not just sitting around on the internet watching YouTube videos and posting comments to other liberty, speakers out there speaking the truth. You should spend your time trying to talk to the people who don't know about this stuff. So I just want to get that out there. If you're new and you don't understand this stuff, or you're really interested in the news, like me, for example, I listen to a lot of liberty-minded talk shows, but that's because I'm an artist, and as I'm drawing or as I'm working on a piece of artwork, I'll just have that on in the background. So, I have something to listen to, and if something really interesting comes on, I'll set down the pencil and I'll pay attention for a moment or go check the article out. But that's why I listen to them. It's sort of just some background noise while I'm working, to help keep my mind focused and to help keep me alert to what's going on. But anyways, before I go ranting on about anything or, just something off topic, let me start getting into the news. Now, there's only a little bit of news today. Again, I've got, a couple of websites up on the screen right now I'm checking out. But what I really want to go over is some news from the past couple of days. Because it's a Saturday. Saturdays are usually slow news days. The most interesting story I've seen so far out of today is a story that was, aired by CNN. Apparently, this is a girlfriend of one of the victims of this flight 370, this missing Malaysian Airlines flight. She's claiming that fighter jets followed the plane before it disappeared, and that she was actually saying, I think, what if I read correctly in the article, that they are saying that the plane's intact and it didn't really crash. But again, that was only on CNN and only according to the claim of this girlfriend of one of the people who was apparently on the flight. So I'm not sure how she got that information, and I'm not sure. Well, I know CNN's running with it because for whatever reason, the ruling class at the moment, the globalists, want to keep this story in the public's mind. I'm not exactly sure why. They're either doing it as a diversion to keep people from paying attention to something else, or they're using it because they want people to remember this plane because it's possibly going to be used in a future false flag attempt. Or it might be both. A lot of times the New World Order only likes to perform these big sort of events if they can get away with multiple things. Again, on 9/11, there was a ton of stuff that the event not only diverted people's attention away from, but it also was used to trigger the war on terror, and it was also which eventually led to the continued and swifter erosion of individual liberty, which technically can't really be eroded because you have it automatically. It's not like the government gives it to you, but they can change the public's view towards liberty so that they can trample people's rights just because no one's willing to stand up for their freedoms. So that was really the most interesting news story for this today, April 5th, 2014, that I've seen so far. It is pretty late now, so I doubt there's going to be much more news coming out. There's a bunch of other stuff. The Mozilla CEO is in trouble because he made some comments, or he actually donated to defend the California's marriage laws, which turned out to be a little bit of a big news story. I'm not going to get too much into it because I think it's sort of a distractionary issue, but it is sort of a big issue because it's a First Amendment issue where he shouldn't be losing his job just because of how he feels, how his view on marriage. That's his right to think whatever he wants to think about it, his right to view it however he wants to view it, and ultimately marriage shouldn't be a government issue. If a church wants to perform marriages between men and women, marriages between men and men, marriages between women and women, marriages between men and dogs, marriages between men and horse, whatever, that should be the individual's choice, and it should be the church's choice, not with the government infringement. And it gets even worse when they start going into a business, like the Hobby Lobby case that's been going on in the Supreme Court, and this other case about the Drudge CEO. Now, for whatever reason, my page just reloaded itself, but there we go, it's back up. But let me go into some of these news stories from the past 2 days. I got a little bit of economic news that I found pretty interesting. This comes out of Michael Snyder at the Economic Collapse blog, and the headline here is 9 of the top 10 occupations in America pay an average wage of less than $35,000 a year. And And that's and it basically said in this article that most people make about $3,000 a month, and that's before taxes. So once taxes take effect, you can imagine what it goes down to. You probably making about $1,900 to about $2,300, $2,300 after taxes. But again, I'm from Maryland, so I'm used to paying extremely high taxes on my paycheck. I lose about a third of what I make to the federal government and to my Maryland state government here in the so-called free state of Maryland. But let me just give you guys the top 10 most common jobs in America. Number 1 is retail sales, and a retail salesperson makes on average about $25,000 a year, and there's about 4.48 million people in the United States who work in retail sales. Now, personally, I work in retail sales. I work for one of the big box retail stores. I'm not proud of it, but a job's a job, and you got to pay the bills somehow, so I do what I have to do unless I can land a radio spot and get some sponsors, or maybe find a means of finalizing my documentaries and maybe self-funding myself. But I'm not exactly sure what sort of government infringement may fall down upon me, considering my physical location to the heart of the New World Order right here in Washington D.C., which is about 20 miles south of me. Probably a little bit less than that, probably only 15. But anyway, let me get back into this article. The second most common job is cashiers. Now, technically, I would associate cashiers with retail sales because I work in retail, but I'm also a cashier. And they're saying that cashiers on average make about $20,000 a year, and there's about 3.34 million cashiers in the United States of America. The third most common job is food prep and serving, and they make about close to $19,000 a year, and there's about 3 million people who work in that field of occupation. Continuing on, the fourth one is general office clerk, basic office assistant. I actually did a little bit of that when I was in high school, and they're saying the average that office clerk makes is about $30,000 a year, and there's about 2.83 million general office clerks in the United States. Now, the one exception to this list, the one job that makes more than $35,000 a year, is a registered nurse. And according to this article, a registered nurse averages about $68,000 a year, really about $69,000, rounding it up a little bit. And 2.66 million people are registered nurses. Just to speed it up here, continuing down, the rest of the list is waiters, customer service reps, laborers in freight, secretaries, and janitors. Those are the most common jobs in the United States of America, and 9 out of 10 of them pay less than $35,000 a year. Me personally, I find these numbers to be a bit skewed, because, again, I work in retail sales, and in the retail store I work at, I'm also a cashier, and I also deal with laboring in the back room and dealing with freight. So, and I don't make anywhere near any of these numbers. On average, I'm lucky to make maybe $12,000 a year, which doesn't make ends meet with the modern inflation rates. But anyway, that being said, let me give you another little bit of economic news. This came out on Friday from, again, Michael Snyder at the Economics Collapse blog, and this one's talking about the reason for our loss of jobs and how important a trade deficit can be for everybody. Now, a lot of people hear this stuff, and if you're not in one of those jobs, you're like, whatever, I make more than that, or whatever. The point is understanding how this impacts you. So if those are the most common jobs, maybe you have kids. Well, would you want one of your kids to only make about $15,000 a year? Is that something you want in the future, or would you like to turn it around so that there be maybe a manufacturing job where they can make maybe $50,000 a year, and maybe learn skills that would enable them to perhaps start their own business, maybe lose some government regulations so that it's easier to start your own business. So everything impacts you. You just have to understand how it can impact you. It may not impact you right away. It may take a little while, or it may impact your progeny, or it may impact your health, or it may impact the next time you go to the grocery store. But anyways, this article, the headline, this was from Economics Collapse blog, again by Michael Snyder. The headline here is Shocking Facts About the Deindustrialization of America That Everyone Should Know. And this article went over how the falling U.S. exports have led to the highest trade deficit in the past 5 months, and it's jumped up to $42.3 billion. That's the trade deficit. So compared to what we export and import, we export more than we import, so we lose about $42.3 billion is the deficit. We lose that amount of money because we don't export more than we import. Now, in this article, they focused only on the trade deficit between the United States and China, just to show you one example. And it's probably the most profound example, but if you look at the most profound example, all the other ones are going to be less than this, but it's already astronomical, just the U.S.-China trade deficit. So here's how you figure it out. Last year, we sold about $122 billion worth of goods to China, and China sold to us about $440 billion worth of goods. So if you can do some basic math there, that means that between us and China, it's about a $318 billion trade deficit. We lose $318 billion based off of just our trade with China alone. And it's been estimated that the USA loses about 9,000 jobs per billion of imported goods. So if we import $318 billion worth of goods from China, you can do the math and figure out what, according to this research, how many jobs we're losing just based off of our trade deficit. And here I think is the most important statistic out of this article, and it's that since 2001, the U.S. has lost more than 56,000 manufacturing facilities. A lot of people I've seen who have analyzed this article, whenever they go over the statistic, they say 56,000 manufacturing jobs. No, it's much worse than that. It is not 56,000 manufacturing jobs. It's 56,000 manufacturing facilities. That's a place where people go to work. Who knows how many people worked in each one of those facilities? If you have 100 people in each one of those manufacturing facilities that went out of business, that's 560,000 people who lost their jobs since 2001, based off of 56,000 manufacturing facilities being lost. And that's only if 100 people worked in that facility. What if more than 100 worked in there? Then you can do the math. You can figure it out. It's really bad that just by doing basic math here, I know that the economy numbers that the government gives to us are wrong. They're lying to our faces, because anyone who can do basic math, and I'm no mathematician. In fact, I only took one math course in college because I was bad at math in high school, and I only needed that one credit in a math class to get my degree in history. So I just took one, and I really wasn't even that good at it. I actually remember missing the final exam, and then realizing I missed it and calling up my math professor and saying, I totally forgot about the final exam, because I ultimately chose not to go to that class very often, because I didn't feel it was very important for me to be learning super advanced mathematics when my main focus of study was geopolitics and history. But I already knew basic arithmetic. I could add, multiply, divide, figure out enough to run a cashier or work as a cashier, which of course I do a little bit at my job. I mainly deal with freight and shipping and receiving, but I do cashier when we're short-handed, and because of the economy, we're very short-handed at our store, and they're not giving us the payroll to hire more people. They're expecting the people that are there to do twice the work in half the time. I've tried to explain to them that you can't put 5 gallons in a 1 gallon bucket. No matter how hard you try, it's not going to work. But they don't want to hear that. Instead, they just breathe down our necks and call us lazy. And then I tell them, you're lowering morale, and people are less inclined to work hard when they have a low morale. And again, they just respond by lowering our morale even more. But I don't want to get into any inside baseball there. Let me continue on with some of this news. Now, I mentioned I already went over a little bit about the big news from today, Saturday. But a lot of these news stories are from Thursday and Friday this week, because I'd written up reports and I'd planned to actually start this radio show a little bit earlier in the week. But just because of my work schedule, and I have a very exhausting, intensive labor job, I tend to be extremely tired after work, and it makes it very difficult to focus on researching the news and presenting it. So the daily report might turn into the weekly report, depending on how this goes. So I might just be able to do one every Saturday and maybe upload Sundays, but we'll see how it goes if I can get the chance to do more. But continuing on here, this is a pretty interesting article. This comes out of Zero Hedge, and the headline here is, "What about the dollar? Russia, Iran announced $20 billion oil for goods deal." Now, this is, of course, the response, because the J.P. Morgan Bank has blockaded Russian accounts and is basically forcing Russia into barter arrangements where, instead of trading their goods with a monetary value, they're trading goods for other goods. They're just trading. There's no monetary value included, and it basically shows that the Russians are willing to abandon the dollar. They're willing to go to a barter system with other countries, which would ultimately hurt the United States more than it would hurt Russia, because Russia's basically saying, look, we don't base our economic system off of printed fake money. We base our economic system off of the goods that we have, which I ultimately always try to convince people. It's not about how much money you have, because money is just, well, in today's society, it's worthless. It's just a fake, make-believe digital number. Cash is more important than what you got in your bank account, how much cash you got, because cash at least carries some value in the minds of the people, more so than a digital currency. But what I always tell people is, stop thinking of your things in monetary value. And I sort of don't like the headline of this, because it equates it in a monetary value, but I guess you have to do that so that the general population can understand how big of a deal was made. And again, the deal that was made was that Russia's going to trade goods to Iran, and Iran's going to trade oil directly to them. Russia's going to give them lumber or gold or silver or whatever, an actual physical thing, and Iran's going to give them actual physical barrels of oil. Or it might be the other way around, because I know Russia has oil too, so maybe Russia's giving Iran the oil and Iran's giving goods to Russia. Or maybe it's just a back and forth. Who knows? I didn't go write down too many notes of the article, and I read it a couple of days ago, so I've forgotten all the details, other than the fact that it was triggered by J.P. Morgan Bank. Now also McDonald's apparently shut down their stores in Crimea, and so the Russian response is to shut down all McDonald's in Russia. And again, it's getting petty with the way this game is being played between Russia and the United States, or really Russia and the New World Order. I'm very hesitant to even acknowledge that there is a United States anymore. I often like to tell people that 100 years ago, in 1913, the United States of America was poisoned. The old republic was poisoned, and it took about almost 100 years for that poison to finally destroy the old republic of the United States of America. And the final death blow came on September 11th, 2001, when the terrorist attacks destroyed the World Trade Center, and we got the Patriot Act, which I think was the final death toll to the constitutional republic of the United States of America. Now we're just another colony of what the global elite like to call the New World Order. And you got to admit that if we're ever going to hopefully try to build a new constitutional republic, or go back to following the principles of the original constitutional republic, the old republic. And if you want to really analyze Star Wars, the stories of Star Wars, that's what Star Wars is trying to warn people about. What happens when a republic becomes an empire. Now they're making these new Star Wars movies. We'll see if since they defeated the empire, if they're able to reform a republic. But it's probably not going to be anything good since it's coming out of Disney, and we know of Disney's Nazi past and other globalist activity that Disney has been involved in, such as the fact that the Disney theme parks are basically test FEMA camps, to figure out how to set up a FEMA camp so that people will accept it. I'm not saying that the FEMA camp's going to have a roller coaster or anything like that, but the housing, the way that they get people into the park, the way the park is secured, the way they monitor where you are in the park, the way that you pay in the park with, special park dollars, stuff like that. But continuing on here, basically that's a big deal because it shows that this economic war between the New World Order and Russia is really taken off, where Russia is willing to say, look, we'll abandon your whole system. We'll stop doing your G8 summits. We're going to stop trading with the dollar. We're going to do our own thing now and say, forget the New World Order. We're Russia, and we're going to be independent. Now, I'm not saying Russia's great. I'm not saying, Vladimir Putin's a great guy. Personally, I call Vladimir Putin the James Bond bad guy, and I like to joke that the world right now is the James Bond villain versus Big Brother from 1984, or versus the scientist of Soylent Green, or versus the scientist of A Brave New World. And in my opinion, I think the James Bond villain has the upper hand here. James Bond villains tend to be a little bit more cunning, a little bit more brazen than the Big Brother bad guys. And those people are really good at suppressing their own people. But if you put them up against another villain, I don't think they'll fare so well. That's not necessarily good for the United States of America either, because if the Russians are successful in defeating the New World Order themselves, well, the United States falls with the New World Order. So it's like a two birds with one stone thing if you're Vladimir Putin. But again, it's a very risky business getting involved in this, because they are in economic stalemate right now, where they're imposing sanctions back and forth or trade deals and stuff like that. But it could trigger a global abandonment of the dollar, which would trigger a collapse in the Western economy, which could trigger the globalists utilizing a false flag to initiate a global war. Bad news all around. I wish I had some good news in the past couple of days, but unfortunately I do not. So I'm just going to keep going on with this economic news that I've been covering. Here's another headline. This one's out of Thursday, and this is from Infowars.com. It's out by Kurt Nemo. He's a good writer over there. And the headline is, IMF warns global stagnation if Ukraine not bailed out. Now, of course, now that the West, the EU, which is really just a smaller component of the greater New World Order, now that the EU is taking control of most of the Ukraine, apart from Crimea, and the International Monetary Fund, which of course is what the IMF stands for, has control of their economy, they're basically saying, we're going to need a bailout, otherwise the whole world economy is going to collapse. So it's basically austerity measures. They're going to, people who are on social services are going to lose social services, they're going to make cuts, and at the same time they're going to raise taxes. That's ultimately what austerity measures are. It's a cutting of social programs and an increase in taxes. Now you may be wondering, well, I thought you'd raise taxes to increase funding for social programs. Well, it's really just about making sure there's no one with a financial ability to prepare themselves against the New World Order endgame. They don't want any middle class, because the middle class poses a significant threat to the globalist hegemonic rule of the world. But going into what this article went over, the IMF boss Christine Lagarde, it might be Lagarde, the E might be silent, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but honestly I don't care, because she's a globalist minion, so I might as well just call her poopy face, because I have no respect for globalist minions. I have a little bit of respect for the globalists themselves, because they're kind of brazen and bold in their attempt at global conquest. So I can sort of respect them a little bit for that. I don't like any of the stuff they're doing. I think it's a bad premise, but I have a little bit more respect for the globalist puppet masters than I do for the globalist puppets, because the globalist puppets are either fools that have sold out to the system or are just useful idiots who actually believe the lies that they're told. But anyway, she said, she warned that global tensions could cloud the global economic outlook, and told an audience at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies that they would need to bail out the Ukraine, otherwise the whole world economy would collapse. And apparently the IMF has set aside $18 billion to rescue the Ukrainian economy. And Congress even voted to give an additional $1 billion. So that's right. The next time you look at the taxes being taken out of your paycheck, just imagine $1 billion worth of those tax monies being collected is now going to be given to the Nazi government in Ukraine. And yes, they are real Nazis. We took an elected government which may have been corrupt, and we replaced it with an unelected government made up of Nazis. And of course it was all funded by George Soros, and if you look at George Soros' history, you'll realize that, wait a minute, George Soros was a Nazi. Not officially a Nazi. He was a Nazi collaborator. He was about 15 years old at the time. And from my research, what he did was he would use his, he's only a 15-year-old kid, he would sneak into places where Jewish people were hiding and learn where the Jewish people were, and they would go tell the Nazis, so the Nazis could go and, of course, take them to slave labor concentration camps or just outright murder them. Those of you who know history know what Nazis do best, and that is murder people and build advanced scientific warfare machinery. That's the two things the Nazis specialized in, is killing people and developing new ways to kill people. But basically they blame Crimea's referendum for all the global economic problems. As expected, as I'm saying, eventually the globalists will attempt to trigger a world war, and then they will blame that war that they created for the economic collapse that they also created. So the war is really not causing this. The war is not just happening by happenstance. They are the orchestrators of all of this, and they're trying to synchronize the events to occur at the same time so that they can, when the historical books are written, the war will be blamed on the economy, and the collapsing economy will be blamed on the war, and nothing will be pinned on the globalist families. But basically, the IMF package that the International Monetary Fund is offering to Crimea, or to the Ukraine, following the Crimean secession and eventual annexation into Russia, the IMF package includes reduced public spending, slashing social programs, eliminating energy subsidies, devaluing the currency, raising taxes, austerity, and more. So basically, and what I find so comical was that during the whole Ukraine crisis, when there were the uprisings and people didn't know what was going to happen, the Russians went to the Ukrainians and offered them an energy deal where they were going to give them a lower price on energy. And the Ukrainians denied. They said they didn't want that. And now that they went with the EU and the IMF, they're going to have to pay more for their energy. I think the Russians were offering them a 60% reduction in energy prices, and now they're probably going to end up getting $160% increase in the energy cost. But again, they, I guess, asked for it, but of course they didn't ask for it. George Soros funded mercenary groups to go in there, just like mercenary groups are being funded to disrupt Syria, just like mercenary groups were used to disrupt Egypt and Libya and Yemen, and it's going on in Jordan, and it went on in Iraq, and it's going on in Iraq right now. And the reason we wanted Iraq was because then we would have another way to ship people into Syria, and of course we're shipping in more Al-Qaeda people because now Al-Qaeda is the good guy, apparently. That's what the government's telling us. The guys that flew those airplanes into the Twin Towers, they were the bad guys back then, but now they're the good guys, and Russia is the bad guys. That's the narrative they're attempting to establish. So I actually had a lot of economic news out of these past 2 days. The final article I got on economic news here is Venezuela enforces fingerprint registry to buy groceries. And this is from Daisy Luther out of the Organic Prepper. And basically the Venezuelan government is saying that you're now going to have to get a fingerprint registry and a loyalty card to shop at the grocery stores, and of course all the grocery stores are owned by the government. In Venezuela, it is a corporatist, fascist, communist system, so the government owns all forms of industry. That's what communism and fascism are: government control of everything. So basically what they're saying is you're going to have to get fingerprinted, and they're going to create a registry, and then you're going to get a little card, and every time you go to the grocery store you have to use your card. And they're saying they're doing it to crack down on hoarders, basically preppers, people who keep more than a week's amount of food in their pantry, is who they're targeting with this. And the president down there, Nicolas Maduro, his administration will track the purchases of people to foil food hoarding at low prices. They don't want people to pay a low price for food. They want people to keep paying the higher prices for food as the food prices go up. They don't want you to buy at a low price and store it so that you can eat at a decent wage while everyone else is paying 2 or 10 times what they were paying for the food. And of course, ultimately, if you wonder what your loyalty cards when you go to the store, whether you're going to one of the big box retail stores and they're offering you the loyalty card, or whether you're going to the supermarket and they got the giant bonus card, or the Weiss customer card, or whatever it is, these loyalty cards are creating a registry of your purchases so that the government can tell what you're buying and when you're buying it. And ultimately, Venezuela is saying that if it turns out when they look at your registry that you're maybe buying too much rice, and they already know you bought 3 pounds of rice last week, they're just not going to let you buy any more rice until they think it's suitable, until they feel you've exhausted your supplies. They won't know for sure, but they're going to base their statistics off of what this loyalty card that the Venezuelan fingerprint registry is going to establish. So just think that can be used here, and they didn't even have to create a fingerprint registry. They just had all the private industries come out with loyalty cards. And of course it'll be more than just food, but food's the big thing because they want to be able to control an aspect of your life, and you get energy from food, and they want to be able to control how much energy you can get. And when I say they, I mean the globalists, the New World Order, the bad guys. The guys who publicly say they want 85 to 95% of the world population dead. Again, Ted Turner has said that publicly. Other globalist minions have said similar things. I'm drawing a blank on them right now, but just because there's so many. But anyway, let me continue on. That's the big deal coming out of Venezuela, and the most important part about it is to understand that we already have such a system here. It's just not being used to control what you buy, but it is being used to monitor what you buy, by using private organizations which are ultimately tied into the big NSA spy grid. Ultimately, everything goes back to an NSA data center. This video or this audio recording is at the NSA data center right now, even before I upload it to YouTube, because they're just recording it directly off of my mic. So it's going in as I speak to an NSA data center. And they got all your purchase history, they got your bank account information, they got everything about your life, every phone call you've ever made, everything you've ever bought using a customer loyalty card or a credit card. They got it in a file in a computer under your name with your social security number on it, so that they can identify it and look at it whenever they see fit. Alright, so that about does it for the economic news out of the past couple of days. Now, I got a bunch of other news, but I want to fast forward to some of the most important news, just because the show's been going on for a little while now, and I don't want to get too caught up in it. So I'm going to hit another large section of news. Just like I had a big bunch of economic news to cover, I have a bunch of Second Amendment news to cover as well. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Fort Hood shooting, part 2. Again, there was the old Fort Hood shooting, which was probably inspired by Islamic extremism. This Fort Hood shooting part 2, the main culprit here seems to be psychiatric drugs. And of course we learned that because of a couple of Infowars.com reporters who actually went to the Fort Hood press conference and were able to ask the question, was the shooter on psychiatric medications? And the Army Lieutenant Colonel was actually honest and said, yes, he was under psychotropic medications, or had been taking psychotropic medications. Now, all mass shootings, I don't care which one you look at, almost always, in 95% of the mass shootings, the mass shooter is always taking a psychotropic drug, whether it be Zoloft or Ambien or whatever. It's an SSRI, and again, I have a short list here of all the people who have performed mass shootings and who have been on SSRI psychotropic medication. The Navy Yard shooter, Aaron Alexis, he was treated with SSRI drugs for mental problems. Staff Sergeant Robert Bales, he was the guy over in Afghanistan who jumped out of the fence of the base and went and killed 16 civilians. He was being treated with SSRI medication. The Batman shooter, James Holmes, in addition to being part of that PSYOPs program, being funded by the Air Force at the college he was attending, I think it was in a graduate program, he was being prescribed psychotropic drugs. And the Columbine killers from back in the 90s, they were taking SSRI psychotropic medication. So the Army admits, and again, this article is at Infowars.com, the article where I got this list from. It's at Infowars.com. It's from Paul Joseph Watson and Alex Jones, and the headline is Army admits Fort Hood shooter was on psychotropic or psychiatric drugs. So there's the big connection between the mass shooters that they use to say the Second Amendment's bad, and it's really not the Second Amendment that's bad, it's really all these psychotropic medications being pushed by the pharmaceutical industry. And what I find most comical is every time I put on a mainstream news network, whether it be Fox News, whether it be MSNBC, whether it be CNN, it doesn't matter. Just try to watch an hour of it and count how many pharmaceutical commercials you see. That's the big industry right now, because they sell all the vaccines, they sell all these drugs, and at the same time, their other corporations, their chemical weapons corporations, are making stuff like GMO to poison us. So they poison us and then they offer us something to make us feel better, but it really just gives us a different type of poison, and then we got to take a different type of poison to fix that, and then a different type of poison until you're just so drugged up you don't know what's going on, and we can see what happens. Just based off of the events of Fort Hood, when they get you taking enough drugs that you don't know what's going on, well, you can find yourself on a rampage, on a mass shooting rampage. So, and again, I dealt in the past with some depression, and a family member was trying to encourage me to let them give me psychotropic drugs. Now, I didn't have the information I have now, but I knew back then, even it's almost innate, it's almost natural for you to know that's not good. I knew, I said, no, I'm not going to let them give me something that screws up my mind. It's like, just because I'm a little bit depressed doesn't mean I'm going to let that. Now, ultimately, I look back on it and I'm like, wait, what really is depression? And it's just a feeling, it's just a sensation. I mean, sometimes when I first wake up, I'm depressed because I'm, just waking up. I got to get moving, got to get active, got to find a reason to go on in the day. But you don't need to be given a drug that, right on the warning label, it says may cause homicidal or suicidal tendencies. You might want to stay away from that sort of stuff. But continuing on here with some Second Amendment news, and the reason I put that in the Second Amendment news is because it was a mass shooting, and ultimately the mainstream media and the government likes to use these mass shooting events to attack the Second Amendment. Now here's another one that's really not Second Amendment news, but it deals with firearms, and it's really more of a police state sort of news story, but it sort of makes my blood boil, especially considering all the other news stories that have come out about police brutality in the past week. Almost every day I look on to study the news, And there's literally dozens of articles a day related to the police doing something that is totally outrageous, like tasing a man for walking down the street, or, you know, a guy's having a seizure, so they tase him until he dies because he didn't follow the order to stop having a seizure. Again, you're having a seizure and a cop orders you to stop having a seizure. You're having a seizure, you can't control that, and the officer says, "Why are you defying my orders?" and tasers this guy. I mean, it's outrageous. Now, that was a story from last year, or it might have been 2 years ago now. But again, most recently they shot that homeless man in Albuquerque just last week, I think it was, and then a week before that there was a high school kid who had stopped a fight in the school, and the police attacked him and broke his arm, literally just snapped it. It's a very gruesome video to watch. I'm very disgusted by limbs breaking. There's a comedy show on Comedy Central. A lot of people, I guess, have seen it. It's called Tosh.0, and I can't stand to watch the show. Not only because Tosh is sort of a hipsy trender. See, I always mix those words up. Now it's hipster trendy. Hippies are a little bit knowledgeable when it comes to GMO and stuff, but the hipsters, they're not knowledgeable about anything. But yeah, Tosh.0 sort of like that, because sometimes he'll just show a quick video clip of something that's gross, like a guy breaking his leg or something, and I'm like, I can't watch it because he just slips them in there. Like, you can be watching and some of the stuff's funny, you know, I'll be laughing and then boom, he'll just show a video of a dude like snapping his neck or something, and it's like, what was the whole point of that? It's not funny, it's sad, it's gross, it's disgusting. Just like the Fear Factor show where they made people eat, you know, like pig testicles and stuff, and it's like, who wants to watch that? Who wants to watch people do gross stuff like that? It's disgusting. So, you know, if shows like that ever wonder why they get canceled, or why they don't get high ratings, maybe people don't want to see someone's leg being broken. If you do want to see someone's leg being broken, just type in police brutality into a video website, and you can watch people's legs and arms being broken all day long if you feel like it. If you want to watch people being sexually assaulted, type in TSA videos and just go watch a bunch of TSA videos, and you can get your kicks all day long on the internet. You don't need Tosh.0 to show you something gross. You don't need to watch Fear Factor and watch people eat something gross. And again, the host of Fear Factor is a little bit aware about the New World Order, and of course Fear Factor's not around anymore, but back when it was, I couldn't watch it because of that. I like some of the like car tricks they made people do, or some of the like stunts that people had to perform were sort of interesting, just to see your average people trying to do these stunts that stuntmen train for years to perform. But then when you watched them like stick their hand in a tub of manure to find a key or something, it's like, well, I'm not watching this show anymore. But anyway, getting into this news story that I was, you know, basically went off into a tangent there, about police brutality videos and just gross stuff that I am very disturbed by watching. And it's not that I have a soft stomach, it's just, you know, I do artwork for my science fiction novel, which is, in some points, very grotesque artwork, because I depict battle scenes very realistically, and there's a lot of battle scenes in the science fiction series I'm writing, but just, you know, watching the police snap somebody's arm for no reason, like I said, it makes my blood boil. Now, this news article is out of Infowars.com from Mikhail Thalen. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. And the headline is, Cop Pulls Gun on 5th Graders Building a Tree Fort. Yes, that is right. There were some 11-year-olds building a tree fort in the woods behind their house, and some neighbors were concerned because the kids were cutting off tree limbs, and they were concerned that the tree limbs on the ground made a tripping hazard. So they called the police, and of course the police arrived, but of course the police, being trained the way they are to act like soldiers nowadays, they pulled their guns and ordered the children on the ground, spread your legs. Of course, you know, it's 11-year-old kids, so I guess the police officer felt threatened. You know, he's not man enough to take on a 11-year-old child. He just has to pull his gun out right away and say, "Get out of that tree, on your knees, I'm working here, I'm here on your knees, I got a gun, I want you out of that tree right now." And it totally freaked the kids out. The kids literally were fearing for their life. And of course it was all over a busybody neighbor worried because some kids were cutting tree branches off of a tree to build a tree fort. I actually have some personal experience with this. When I was younger, probably about the same age, about 11 or 12, me and one of my friends every day after school would go into the woods out by his house. And we decided to build a tree fort out in the woods by his house next to this creek. And we would go out there every day and work on it a little bit after school. Until one day we had gathered some bamboo to sort of camouflage our tree fort, to keep it more hidden in the forest there. And, just because we were kids and we just wanted something fun to do after school, and that was fun for us to go out there and explore in the wilderness and build a tree fort. And one day the police came and with their guns drawn, and we were out there just building this tree fort, and it's a little bit shocking. Now, I think this police officer just had a handgun drawn when he approached these 11-year-old kids. I had a park police people were the ones who confronted us when I was 12 years old, and they had M16 drawn, full auto, and right at our faces, and they were pretty good at sneaking up on us. I got to give them credit there. But again, we were really busy working on the tree fort, so we weren't paying too much attention to what was going on around us. But again, it's a total overreaction to something. And again, that we learned from the police officer, because it was back in an era when the police weren't total snobs, and ultimately the cop just let us go because he was like, "Oh, you're just kids building a tree fort, no big deal." But it had been a busybody neighbor who had seen us going out into the woods and apparently was concerned we were doing something bad out there in the wilderness. But anyway, switching gears here, it's just another example of how the police are being militarized. Now, I'm coming up on the 1 hour mark, so I've been analyzing news for quite some time now, and I'm just going to try to finish up with a few of these articles here. I'll just read to you the headlines real quick, and then get into the big bombshell, big story that came out yesterday. So these two new articles. This first one is out of shtfplan.com, written by Max Slavo, and the headline is "Outrage over Gun-Free Zone. The very people trained to take out armed attackers are disarmed." And of course, this is a news article talking about the Fort Hood shooting, because military people on military bases are basically not allowed to carry a firearm. And it's basically showing that a bunch of people on Twitter are expressing outrage at that. Like, why wouldn't you let soldiers who are trained to defend people from violent attackers not be armed on their own military base? Why is that the case? And of course, if you're wondering why it's the case, it's because Bill Clinton made a law back when he first became president, because he was concerned that the military was going to overthrow his presidency. So they made that law back then, and it's been in effect ever since. Now, Fort Hood is huge. It is the largest military base in the world, and there's about 50,000 people on the base at any given time. But only military police are allowed to carry weapons. And isn't it sort of funny that these mass shootings always happen in gun-free zones? It's schools, or it's malls, or it's military bases, or it's naval yards, places where people on average are not allowed to carry a firearm. Because think about it, if you were first of all just one of these crazy, whacked out, drugged up people who wants to go do a mass shooting, you're not going to want to go somewhere like a rodeo in Texas. Because if you go try to shoot up people at a rodeo in Texas, well, there's a good chance that 50% of the people at that rodeo are also packing heat. And the moment you fire off your first shot, you're probably going to get hit with maybe 50 shots from other people. That'll drop you very quickly, and by the time the police arrive, the only person that'll be being hauled away in a paddy wagon will be that one person who was crazy enough to try to do a mass shooting event. And I'm sorry if sometimes my mic gets overpowered. It is a high quality headset that the mic is sometimes too strong, and I hate to wear it over my head because it's really heavy, and it just puts an added strain on my neck that I don't like. So I just put the headset on the desk and speak into the mic, so sometimes a little closer to the mic and sometimes I'm a little bit further away from the mic. But sometimes I notice in my little sound bar that it gets a little bit overpowered at points. So I just wanted to apologize for that. But it is significantly better than the audio quality of my cell phone videos. Those have horrible audio quality. It's just atrocious. As I mentioned, that's the reason I stopped doing the daily reports recently, was because when I went back through and watched them, they were almost unwatchable because the sound quality was so bad. So continuing on here with these final news stories I want to hit. This one is another story out of Infowars.com. This one's by Steve Watson. And the headline here is Connecticut student suspended for asking governor questions about gun control. And it's basically about this student at Assuntuck Community College. The student's name was Nicholas Saucier. And he apparently works for an ammunition manufacturing business. And the governor was at the college campus giving a talk, and I guess the students were allowed to ask questions, and this student asked a question about the president's stance on gun control, and he stressed that the recent Connecticut gun laws were negatively impacting his ammunition manufacturing business. And basically, like these gun-grabbing politicians always tend to do, he refused to answer the question. And the college president ultimately had the student taken away by campus security, and because the student, when the governor refused to answer his question, the student responded with an insult to the governor, and the college president, I guess, got all upset, and the student got charged with harassment and making threats and suspended. So after his suspension, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education stepped in to appeal the case to try and get the student back into school. But the college claims that they're not going to let him, he's going to have to carry out his full suspension, because when they performed the appeal, they did not let any information be presented that showed that his First Amendment rights were being infringed upon. Basically you're not allowed to ask a question, is what went on. He asked a question and he got suspended for asking a question. We're living in that sort of an age. Like I've said, people will lose their jobs sometimes for talking about the New World Order. Sometimes I fear my job is on the line because I talk about the New World Order a lot. And all the different stuff they're doing. All of it. GMOs, poison the food, fluoride in the water, false flag attacks, everything. All of it. I tell as many people as I can. I scream it from the rooftops, day in and day out, everywhere that I go. I'm gonna go carve a message into a mountain, I think, one day. There's a local mountain here I like to climb. I haven't actually been there in a while since I got my new work schedule, but Sugarloaf Mountain, for those of you who are living here in the free state of Maryland, you may have heard of it. It's a relatively small mountain. It's sort of a unique mountain in that it's a lone mountain all by itself. Most mountains are part of mountain ranges, but this one just sort of sits there. And I often joke that it's really an ancient pyramid that is sort of in decay and covered with plants, and if archaeologists actually went and started to remove some of the vegetation and some of the crumbling rocks, they would discover that it in fact houses an internal chamber. And I think there may be an internal chamber. I could be wrong, but there is a building that is closed off relatively close to the summit of the mountain, built out of stone, that looks like it has a stairway that goes down into the mountain. Now, the mountain, just a little bit of historical information, going off topic here, but just, letting people know about the glorious Sugarloaf Mountain, where I might, carve a message in stone one day for future generations to always remember, never forget the ideals of liberty. It's a really nice mountain, really fun mountain to climb. It's you can do it in less than an hour. You can, rock climb. It's not a difficult rock climb. You're not going to need any real rock climbing gear. It's a gradual slope. There are some iffy locations where you should know what you're doing before you climb upon it. But even if you do fall, you shouldn't get too much of a serious injury unless you sort of tumble down multiple ledges. But there's a lot of things to break your fall on the mountain. It's not a real mountain, like I say. I think it's really a pyramid, but might be going off the deep end there in my science fiction novel. Sugarloaf Mountain is a pyramid. But again, that's at my science fiction level. But anyway, to get back into the final news topic of the day. So again, the main thing you should understand out of that last article I went over about the Connecticut student being suspended for asking a question is his First Amendment rights were infringed upon. It's like, you're not allowed to ask a question in America? What? And there's actually another story that sort of ties into that, where this one came out Thursday, which is actually another Infowars.com article from Paul Joseph Watson. And this article's headline is, "You answer to me. Cop breaking into home arrests man." And basically this cop just is like breaking into this house. There's a guy who said, like, he answers the door, he says, there's what's the big deal? And the cop just immediately tries to like bust the door down, and he's like yelling at the guy, and the guy's like, what did I do? Why are you doing this? Why are you breaking in here? Why are you arresting me? And the officer replies, "I'm not answering you. You answer to me." And then he tackles the homeowner. And he was ultimately apparently arrested for resisting an officer. Well, how did he resist the officer? By asking the officer, "Why are you arresting me?" I think the officer has to tell you why he's arresting you. Isn't that part of the Miranda rights? But again, in the New World Order, you have no rights. So the police can break into your house and arrest you for resisting arrest, for arresting you for nothing. Apparently the officer claims that the neighbors heard cussing. So I guess cussing now is a legal activity. So you better watch your language out there, folks. Otherwise, the police might come arrest you for resisting arrest. And you better not ask why they're arresting you, because if you've ever cussed in your life, you know why they're arresting you. They're arresting you for cussing. So you better not ask any questions, even if you have no idea what's going on. It's just totally outrageous. But getting back into it, the final news story of the day, and this is big and important. So I hope you stuck around to listen. Again, my voice box is giving out on me after an hour of this, so it's going to take me some time to get into this, doing a non-stop, over an hour long talking show, whereas opposed to my old videos were like 15 minutes or 30 minutes on my cell phone, because that's all it could handle recording. But this final news story is again out of Infowars.com. It's another Paul Joseph Watson article, PJW. And the headline here is, "Could U.S. Constitution be changed to eliminate Second Amendment? ? And this is ultimately being brought up because the 2/3 constitutional amendment mark has been reached this week. Again, there's two ways to bring about a constitutional convention, and what a constitutional convention is where delegates from the state get together to basically rewrite or change certain aspects of the Constitution. Now, me personally, they already don't follow the Constitution, so changing it isn't going to do anything if they already don't follow the rules that are in it. But ultimately, I have a feeling that this is being done as a means, just like the headline from the article says. It's a way for them to change or alter or eliminate the Second Amendment. It's another attempt to gun grab by the New World Order gun grabbers. But just a few days ago, Michigan became the 34th state to vote in favor of a constitutional convention, and that marked the 2/3 of the states that need to vote in favor to have a constitutional convention. The other way is if 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate vote for a constitutional convention, you have it. So there's two ways to do it, and that's because the Founding Fathers were setting up checks and balances, and that's one of the checks and balances, that if 2/3 of the Congress and 2/3 of the Senate don't vote for a constitutional convention, 2/3 of the states can do it, and it still works. But ultimately, I think a con, which is what the short abbreviation in the modern world of acronyms is, it's being called a con, a constitutional convention. It could be bad. They ultimately have the power at that point to change whatever they want in the Constitution. They can make the presidency an absolute dictator if they want, or they can expand rights for individuals. The whole Constitution goes up for debate in a constitutional convention. I think it's a bad idea because I think ultimately we already have a really good constitution which enumerates our individual rights. The only problem is it has never been followed to its full potential. Even since 1776, when it was originally conceived, it has never been followed or carried out the way it was intended to be. And the founders understood at the time. They said, we were setting up a blueprint for the future. We know that at our current point in history, not all of these rights are going to be valued, but we're hoping that by building a country based on individual liberties, that this momentum can continue into the future, and hopefully these rights will not only just be enumerated and known about, but they will be societally carried out. So personally, I think we should just go back to following the Constitution as opposed to trying to rewrite it. And the real reason is because the people in power right now, we don't want them rewriting the Constitution. We have a bunch of globalist minions in control, and if they get the ability to rewrite the Constitution, the Lord only knows what they're going to come up with. And here's an example. A former Supreme Court Justice, John Paul Stevens, no doubt a globalist minion, who's a big gun grabber, he recently called for changing the Second Amendment so that only members of the militia could own firearms. Now, I use that as an example to show that the people in power right now would use a constitutional convention to ultimately destroy individual rights as opposed to empowering individuals. But it also shows the ignorance of the gun grabbers, that they don't really understand the Second Amendment. And this is really sad because he's a former Supreme Court justice. If anyone should know the law of the land, it should be a Supreme Court justice. But he doesn't get it because he thinks the militia is different from the citizenry. He doesn't understand what the word militia means. So even if he did change the Second Amendment where it said only members of the militia have the right to keep and bear arms, it wouldn't matter because the militia is the citizenry. That's what the militia is. A well-armed and regulated militia is a well-armed and regulated group of citizens. And you know, the whole verse is a well-regulated militia being necessary for the freedom of a free, or for the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And the reason the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed is because people need to keep and bear arms in order for there to be a militia. And in order for there to be a free state, there needs to be a militia. There needs to be a group of armed citizens to defend themselves and to defend the free state. You're not supposed to have a standing army in a free society. You're supposed to have everybody in a constitutional pact with one another where if anybody messes with our country, we're going to get together with our guns and we're going to stop them. Or, you know, not just guns. I mean, you know, swords, spears, clubs. In the future, we may have laser weapons or, you know, lightsabers or whatever it happens to be. That's why they use the word arms, not guns, because they're saying any form of armaments. People have the right to keep and bear any form of armaments. And what does that mean? You have the right to own and carry any form of weaponry, period, and no law shall infringe upon that. Well, of course, laws do infringe upon that. For example, here in the state of Maryland, you can't have a pistol grip, you can't have a foregrip, you can only have a 10-round magazine, you're not allowed to carry a firearm unless you get a concealed carry. But you're only going to get concealed carry if you're a former police officer or if you know somebody in government or if you have a lot of money to give to somebody in government. So they're already infringing. They've already broken the Second Amendment right there. Then, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the Bill of Rights has been destroyed. It's gone. And like I said at the start of the show, despite how awful it may sound, in my heart and in my mind, I already know that the old Republic of the United States of America is dead and gone. A lot of people are still in mourning. A lot of people are still in disbelief. But the truth of the matter is, the old Republic died on September 11th, 2001. And ever since then, we've been living in the infancy of the New World Order. And as an infant, the New World Order sort of looks like the old republic a little bit. It has some similar characteristics, but that's just because the New World Order is an infant right now. Wait till the New World Order becomes a toddler. Then the New World Order is going to be a big problem. It's not going to look anything like the old republic. And once it reaches adolescence, people aren't even going to know what the old republic means anymore. Because by the time the New World Order reaches this adolescent stage, who knows if there will be any more people left other than the cyborg transhumanist globalists that run the New World Order. So that about does it. That was the big bombshell news out of the last couple days. It's really this, that there could be a new constitutional convention, and in my personal opinion, no good will come out of it. It is a bad thing, and I know there's been a lot of people in the liberty movement have been calling for a constitutional convention, but changing the Constitution is not going to do anything if the people who are already in power don't follow the rules that we have already. So if we change it, it's irrelevant because they're not following the Constitution as so as it is. Do you understand that? I hope you do understand that. And that about does it. Oh, and just a final note here. I learned from a reliable source that told me that there was a Supreme Court ruling in a gun case, and the Supreme Court's unanimous decision in their dissent was that the Bill of Rights is not a list of rights that are inalienable. And what inalienable means is that rights that no one can take away from you. They're rights you have at birth forever. The Supreme Court in this recent ruling, and I don't know the name of the court case. I'll try to get it at some point, but this again, I just heard from a reliable source. I haven't been able to confirm it for myself yet, just because I haven't really had time to investigate it. But because the source is reliable, I'm relatively, I feel comfortable sharing it with everybody, and that is that the Supreme Court basically, like I said, they say your rights are not inalienable. The Bill of Rights is actually a list of privileges that the government can take away with legislation at any time it sees fit. So the Supreme Court has ultimately abandoned any chance of standing up to the New World Order. So now the Congress, the executive branch, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branches are all under control of the New World Order, whether it be because they sold out, whether it be because they actually believe the New World Order is going to be a good thing, or whether it be because they're being blackmailed by the NSA spy grid. We cannot depend upon any branch of the federal government to stop this global conquest. The only thing that's going to stop it is individuals like me, like you, people listening to this show, like guys like Alex Jones and the whole InfoWars team, guys like Jesse Ventura out there speaking the truth, guys like Michael Rivero. There's a whole host of liberty truth speakers out there. So, and it's going to take more, because again, none of us are perfect, but maybe if we all come together around liberty, we all have a common understanding of individual liberty, make that our focal feature, and then if we have differences on other opinionated things like gay marriage or marijuana legalization, let's put that stuff aside for the moment and let's focus on individual liberty. Now again, those issues ultimately go into individual liberty, but that has to be the unifying foundation factor for all of humanity right now. Otherwise, the whole world is going to be conquered by 13 aristocratic globalist families, and they are literally going to unleash hell on earth. And I don't want to see that happen, and I'm sure you don't want to see that happen, and I doubt there's anybody other than the globalists and their, insane followers. As FDR said back in the 1930s about Hitler, he said, "He and his hypnotized followers call this a new order. It is not new, and it is not order." Again, there's hypnotized people who think the New World Order is a good thing, but it's not. And it's not new, and it's not order. It's chaos, and it's not new because it's feudalism. Feudalism is one of the oldest governmental systems in human history. It's what we tried to escape from in the Renaissance, the Reformation in 1776, was an escape from a feudalistic society. We were going into a liberty society, getting away from tyranny and creating a new form of government based on individual liberty, not built around a ruling king or a royal family. And that's what the New World Order is. It's neo-feudalism. It's where they want new royal families and people to be serfs and peasants and slaves again, while they live in castles with jet copters and armed guards, while we live in little shacks and tend the fields and pay tribute to the royal aristocracy above us. That is neo-feudalism. It's ancient feudalism with modern technology. It's neo-feudalism. That is the ultimate goal of the globalists. Once they reduce the world population with whatever's left, they plan to establish a neo-feudalistic world where their families rule as kings and everyone else is a serf or a slave or a knight under service to them. So that about does it for the day. I'm running out of time here. I've been going for about an hour and a half, which is about the average I want the new Liberty Intelligence Organization Network radio program to go on for. But I hope people found all this information informative. Again, I had a couple of news stories I didn't get a chance to get to, but I covered a lot of news, and I shared with people my analysis and understanding of a lot of the stuff that's going on, and I hopefully tried to emote to you people how all of these things impact your life and your individual liberty. And it's hopefully through the knowledge that I'm attempting to teach you about that you can empower yourself to make better choices in your life. And the reason I do this is because if we all start making better choices, if we're all more knowledgeable, and if we all respect the dignity of individual liberty, we can all rise together. We can all improve the quality of our lives. But the bad guys would rather only improve the quality of their lives by stealing from us. We have to share with one another so that together we can rise up and oust this globalist network that has been perpetrated against us. So that does it. Again, it is Saturday, April 5th, 2014. This was the Liberty Intelligence Organization Network Daily Radio Report. And I was your host, Ricky Phillips. And before I sign off, I just want to say to everybody, as always, stay strong, stay safe, stay free, and most importantly, stay informed. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you, or I'll talk to you in the next radio report.